Think your city has problems? You haven't seen anything yet. Across the U.S., some cities are spiraling into chaos, and the numbers prove it. Crime is out of control. Jobs are drying up. Families are stuck in cycles of poverty with no way out. Public schools are collapsing, and housing is either too expensive or downright unsafe. The American dream? In these places, it's barely a whisper. These cities didn't just make the list. They earned it through years of economic decline and government failure. In today's countdown, we'll expose the top 10 U.S. cities where life has become nearly unlivable. Some might surprise you. Others are exactly what you feared. And when we get to number one, you'll understand why even lifelong residents are packing up and never looking back. Don't miss this one. Let's dive in right now. Number 8. Little Rock, Arkansas. Little Rock, the capital of Arkansas, might carry the prestige of being a state's political and economic hub. But for many of its residents, daily life here feels anything but privileged. The city sits at a troubling intersection of high crime, persistent poverty, and a struggling economy, making it one of the hardest places to live in the U.S. right now. Let's begin with the crime rate. Little Rock reports a violent crime rate of 14.6 incidents per 1,000 residents, well above the national average. Gun violence, assaults, and robberies are frequent in several parts of the city. While some neighborhoods remain relatively safe, others are plagued by nightly gunshots and street-level crime, creating a sense of fear and instability that never truly disappears. But safety isn't the only concern. Little Rock also struggles economically. The median household income is $50,982, which may seem reasonable until you consider rising housing costs, food inflation, and soaring energy bills. Nearly 20% of the population lives below the poverty line, meaning thousands of families are constantly juggling bills, rent, and basic necessities just to get by. Unemployment continues to be a challenge, especially for lower-income residents and those without a college degree. And while downtown has seen some revitalization with new restaurants, art venues, and public spaces, those improvements have not trickled down to underserved communities. Public schools in Little Rock face issues ranging from underfunding to overcrowded classrooms and teacher shortages. Children in struggling neighborhoods are less likely to receive the quality education they need to break the cycle of poverty. Access to quality health care is also inconsistent, especially in poorer zip codes where clinics are overwhelmed and transportation options are limited. Little Rock is a city trying to reinvent itself, but the road ahead is long, and for many it's paved with uncertainty. For residents without resources or a support system, the capital city can feel more like a pressure cooker than a place of opportunity. That's what makes Little Rock stand out. Not for its monuments or politics, but for the quiet suffering happening behind closed doors. And that's why it takes the number 8 spot on our list. Number 7, Baltimore, Maryland. Baltimore, a city once hailed as the birthplace of the American national anthem, now finds itself grappling with a far different tune. Instead of unity and pride, many of Baltimore's neighborhoods are singing songs of survival, shaped by years of systemic neglect, poverty, and rising violence. Let's begin with crime, because in Baltimore it's impossible to ignore. The city routinely ranks among the most dangerous in the country, with over 300 homicides annually in recent years. Gun violence has reached epidemic levels, with many residents reporting that they hear gunshots more often than they hear sirens. Entire communities live with the constant tension of safety, and for parents raising children, every walk to school or visit to the park comes with anxiety. Economically, the picture is just as bleak. Baltimore's median household income sits at around $52,164. But this figure hides massive disparities between affluent areas and the city's impoverished neighborhoods. More than 20% of the city lives in poverty, and in some neighborhoods, that number skyrockets to over 35%. Access to jobs, especially those that pay a living wage, remains a barrier for many. Manufacturing and shipping jobs that once sustained the city have largely disappeared, and replacement industries have been slow to reach the communities that need them most. Then there's the education system. Baltimore's public schools suffer from chronic underfunding, low graduation rates, and deteriorating infrastructure. Stories of classrooms without heat in winter and no air conditioning in summer are all too common. Students in these conditions are not just being underserved, they're being forgotten. Healthcare access also varies wildly by neighborhood. In lower-income communities, many residents rely on emergency rooms for primary care, and mental health services are often overwhelmed or inaccessible. Baltimore is a city of contrasts: gorgeous waterfronts and crumbling row homes, world-class universities and neglected public schools, historic pride and present-day pain. It's a city with heart, but too often it feels like it's beating alone, unheard. And that's what lands Baltimore at number 7 on our list. Not just for the data, but for the deep divide between what this city could be and what it currently is. Number 6, Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland, once a shining symbol of American industry and grit, is now a city fighting to stay afloat. Decades ago, it was a hub for manufacturing, innovation, and upward mobility. Today, for far too many residents, Cleveland represents broken promises, dwindling opportunities, and a daily battle against poverty. Let's start with the harsh reality. Cleveland has one of the highest poverty rates of any major U.S. city, with a staggering 33% of residents living below the poverty line. That's 1 in every 3 people struggling to pay rent, buy food, or cover basic needs. And the problem is especially acute among children, where nearly half of all youth in the city are growing up in poverty. The median household income is just $36,000, far below the national average. Even for those who work full-time, wages often fail to keep up with rising living costs. The job market remains unstable, and many of the high-paying union jobs that once fueled Cleveland's growth have vanished, replaced by lower-wage service positions with limited benefits. Crime is another painful reality. The violent crime rate stands at 17.1 incidents per 1,000 residents, and while not the highest in the nation, it's enough to make safety a constant concern, particularly in underserved neighborhoods where police response times are slower and community programs are underfunded. Education also reflects the city's struggles. Many public schools in Cleveland are under-resourced, plagued by aging buildings, outdated materials, and low test scores. Graduation rates lag behind the national average, limiting the prospects for future generations before they even leave high school. Healthcare disparities are widespread, especially in East Cleveland and other marginalized areas where hospitals are scarce and preventive care is nearly non-existent. Mental health support is insufficient, and addiction, especially opioid abuse, continues to devastate entire blocks. Cleveland is a city that still holds pride in its sports teams, in its working-class roots, and in the resilience of its people. But that pride is now tempered by frustration, because here, survival isn't a metaphor, it's a daily reality. Number 5, New Orleans, Louisiana. New Orleans, a city world-renowned for its music, food, and soul, is also a place where beauty and struggle exist side by side, every single day. While the French Quarter dazzles tourists with jazz and beignets, just blocks away, many locals are living in conditions that border on crisis. The violent crime rate in New Orleans is 14.9 per 1,000 residents, making it one of the most dangerous cities in America. Gun violence is rampant, with carjackings, robberies, and homicides plaguing entire neighborhoods. And while visitors stroll Bourbon Street, many locals live with the fear that simply stepping outside could make them a target. The median household income is just $43,258, far below the national average. Pair that with a poverty rate of around 24%, and you'll find a city where economic struggle is the norm, not the exception. For many families, even holding down multiple jobs isn't enough to cover the essentials, especially with the rising cost of housing. Rent prices have skyrocketed in recent years, driven by tourism and gentrification. Historic neighborhoods have been transformed into Airbnbs, pushing longtime residents out of the homes their families have lived in for generations. Education is another battleground. While some charter schools show promise, others fall short, leaving wide disparities between what children in different parts of the city can expect from their schools. Resources are stretched thin, and many students face overcrowded classrooms, aging facilities, in limited access to counseling or special education support. Healthcare access is uneven, and many lower-income neighborhoods lack nearby clinics or pharmacies. Addiction, mental health issues, and the long-term trauma of Hurricane Katrina continue to haunt the city's most vulnerable populations. But perhaps the hardest pill to swallow is this. New Orleans is a city with heart, but that heart is breaking. It beats loudly during Mardi Gras and Saints games, but quietly aches in the silence of overlooked communities. Number 4. Anchorage, Alaska. Anchorage, a city surrounded by staggering natural beauty, snow-capped mountains, and crisp Arctic air, might look like a winter postcard. But for the people who live here year-round, the reality is far less romantic. Behind the wilderness and solitude lies a city grappling with some of the harshest living conditions in the country, economically, socially, and mentally. Anchorage has a violent crime rate of 11.9 incidents per 1,000 residents, surprisingly high for a city of its size and remoteness. Assaults, domestic violence, and property crimes are widespread, and law enforcement often struggles to keep up, especially in rural areas just outside city limits. But it's not just crime. The cost of living in Anchorage is among the highest in the United States. Groceries, gas, and utilities, especially heating, are far more expensive than in most mainland cities. Even though the median household income is $83,810, that number is misleading. When a gallon of milk costs $6 and heating bills hit $500 in winter, even middle-class families find themselves stretched dangerously thin. Add to that the housing crisis, limited availability, high rents, and rising homelessness, particularly among Alaska Native populations. Healthcare access is another major hurdle. While Anchorage has hospitals, specialized care often requires flying to Seattle or beyond, which is not an option for many low-income residents. Mental health services are insufficient, and seasonal affective disorder is widespread due to long, dark winters that can last up to 8 months. Isolation isn't just geographical, it's psychological. Residents face months with little sunlight, limited social interaction, and the very real mental strain of living far from family, resources, and support systems. For many, Anchorage offers the promise of freedom and nature, but the day-to-day reality is cold, in more ways than one. It's a place where survival isn't just about money, it's about mental strength, endurance, and sheer will. Number 3, St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis, once a gateway to the American West, now feels like a city stuck at a dead end for many who call it home. Behind the iconic Gateway Arch and championship sports teams lies a city deeply wounded by decades of racial segregation, economic decline, and rampant violence. Let's start with the most glaring issue, violent crime. St. Louis consistently ranks among the most dangerous cities in the U.S., with a violent crime rate of 20 per 1,000 residents. Gun violence is a daily reality in many neighborhoods, and for families, the constant threat of shootings isn't just frightening, it's numbing. Some blocks are so plagued by crime that residents feel like they're living under siege. But crime is only part of the picture. St. Louis faces deep economic divides that seem nearly impossible to bridge. The unemployment rate is around 6.9%, and the median household income is just $45,782, far below the national average. Meanwhile, nearly 1 in 4 residents lives in poverty, and entire sections of the city have been hollowed out by population loss, leaving behind rows of abandoned homes and collapsing infrastructure. The education system reflects that same division. Public schools in underserved neighborhoods are underfunded, understaffed, and often underperforming. Opportunities for advancement are limited, and many young people grow up feeling like escape, not success, when is their only goal. Access to healthcare is another major challenge, especially in low-income areas where hospitals have closed and clinics are few and far between. Add to that decades of discriminatory housing practices, redlining, and a lack of investment in Black communities, and you have a city where your zip code can still determine your future. St. Louis has its beauty, its blues, its baseball, its deep pride, but for too many, it's a city of missed opportunities and unkept promises. It's not just a place where systems failed. It's a place where many feel like they were never even invited into the system to begin with. That's why St. Louis takes the number 3 spot on our list, not only for its hardships, but for the silence that's met them for far too long. Number 2, Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis, a city with a musical soul and civil rights legacy, today faces a reality far removed from the rhythm and hope it once symbolized. For many, life in Memphis is a constant battle against poverty, crime, and shrinking opportunities. Let's begin with safety, or the lack of it. Memphis has one of the highest violent crime rates in the nation, with a shocking 2,420 incidents per 100,000 residents. That's nearly 5 times the national average, and it means people here live with daily fear. Not fear of the unknown, but of what's become painfully predictable. Gun violence, carjackings, armed robberies. In many neighborhoods, they're not rare events, they're regular occurrences. But the danger doesn't stop at violence. The unemployment rate in Memphis is 8.6%, significantly higher than the national average. Job opportunities are limited, especially for those without advanced education. And when jobs are available, they often pay wages that can't cover rising costs. The median household income is $48,090, and that's before factoring in inflation, rent increases, and basic living expenses. Nearly 25% of the city lives below the poverty line, including a staggering number of children. Public services struggle to keep up. Schools are underfunded, healthcare is difficult to access in low-income areas, and public transit barely connects those in need with the services they rely on. While some pockets of downtown Memphis have seen redevelopment and investment, many longtime residents feel left out, pushed further to the margins as rents rise and support systems weaken. The result? A deepening divide between the city's public image and the lived experience of most of its people. Yet even amid all of this, Memphis is full of fighters, families who stay, who try, who believe it can be better. But belief alone can't pay the bills or stop a bullet. That's why Memphis ranks number 2 on this list, not just for the numbers, but for the weight its people carry every single day. It's a city rich in soul, but right now that soul is exhausted. Number 1, Detroit, Michigan. Detroit, once the engine of America's automotive empire, now stands as a haunting symbol of economic collapse, population flight, and systemic failure. This is a city where entire neighborhoods have vanished, where broken windows and overgrown lots stretch for blocks, and where opportunity feels more like a memory than a goal. Let's begin with the numbers. Detroit's violent crime rate is 23 incidents per 1,000 residents, giving locals a 1 in 43 chance of becoming a victim. While crime has decreased slightly in recent years, the trauma of decades of violence still hangs heavy, and in many neighborhoods, danger remains constant. But Detroit's challenges go far deeper than crime. The median household income is just $36,962, and a staggering 30% of the population lives below the poverty line. That's nearly 1 in 3 people struggling just to afford food, housing, transportation, and healthcare. The economic collapse that began with the fall of the auto industry never truly ended. It just shifted forms. Factories closed, jobs left, and the city was left behind. The public school system, once a point of pride, is now deeply underfunded and fragmented. Graduation rates are low, buildings are crumbling, and children often attend class without heat in the winter or working plumbing. Access to healthcare is limited, especially in the city's poorest zip codes, and mental health services, so essential in communities facing generational trauma, are stretched beyond capacity. Yes, there are sparks of revitalization in parts of downtown and midtown, but they haven't reached the neighborhoods where most Detroiters live. Instead, many feel forgotten, not just by their government, but by the country they helped build. Detroit isn't just struggling, it's surviving in spite of everything working against it. That's why it tops our list, because no other city represents the gap between potential and reality quite like Detroit. A city with muscle, memory, and music, now weighed down by what could have been, and what still might be, if anyone's willing to fight for it. These 8 cities highlight a sobering reality. Not every part of America is built equally. While some enjoy safety, stability, and opportunity, others are fighting just to survive. We hope this list opened your eyes to what life is really like in the shadows of the American dream. Is your city on this list? Or do you think we missed a place that's just as bad or worse? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters, and your story might help someone else feel seen. If you appreciated this breakdown, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more honest looks at life across the U.S.